Hello and welcome to this very special edition of The Stack. A magazine dear to my heart is celebrating 2 decades, Fantastic Man. Also, I've invited the editor of another favorite title of mine, Empire. And finally, the man that brought back the dire wolf, tell us how slow journalism is good for science. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. From dire wolves to jaws. Stay tuned to The Stack. But first, I'm very happy to celebrate 20 years of the menswear Bible, Fantastic Man. I had the pleasure to work with Dan in Amsterdam a few years back. The magazine was co-founded by Gert Jonkers and Joop van Bennekom. For their 40th edition, they decided to publish 10 different covers, including the man who was on the cover of the very first Fantastic Man, Rupert Everett. Also featured on the covers is playwright Jeremy O'Harris, Rocco Ricci, among others. A pleasure to speak with the title's co-founder and editor-in-chief, Gert Jonkers.
It feels festive and it feels like going all out. I mean, that's what the fun of making 10 covers is. But indeed, it's the first time we did it. I mean, occasionally we used to have the same person twice in like a black and white and a color picture, or Kyle MacLachlan with his eyes closed and open. So there were sort of slight variations where we had like multiple that's what we called our multiple covers. But indeed, now we thought there's also so many amazing people in this issue, I think, from Haider Ackerman. Rupert Everett is back. He was on the first issue of Fantastic Man, and we thought let's put him on the cover again. Rocco Ricci, Adrian Brody. So there's lots of amazing people. Carlos Alcaraz, maybe my favorite cover, actually. It's hard to choose. As you probably know from being involved in a magazine too, it's hard to sort of make a decision. What do you call your lead story? Are you doing the other stories a disservice? So yeah, we did them all.
But as always, and I have to be honest, say here on air, my favorite cover is Rocco Ricci. And the thing that made me smile when I saw that cover is that you guys are different. I mean, I have to say, sometimes you take some risks, and I think you usually pay it off in a way. Of course, there are people, that there will be on the cover of Fantastic Man. But even I, as a reader, I was a little bit surprised in a very good way.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes. That's a joy for us for doing it. I mean, sort of there's nothing more boring than doing the expected. It's always this fine line. You can't reinvent yourself every 6 months, and you don't want to reinvent yourself every 6 months because you also, have your own taste and your own take on things. But you have to surprise yourself, and therefore you have to surprise other people.
Would you agree with me, Het, that Fantastic Man, it's a magazine for those who enjoy clothes and the small details? It's not necessarily about, sure, you go to Milan, you go to Paris, of course, you follow what's happening in the world of fashion, but it's really much an appreciation of clothing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely, we've always sort of admired clothes more than we've admired fashion. I see it at home for myself. It's I'm actually struggling with the amount of clothes I have at the moment because I love clothes so much. And I'm not, I'm not a terrible fashion victim, and I don't buy a lot of clothes, but I never get rid of anything. I think if a pair of Dries van Noten jeans was nice 12 years ago, it's actually still nice. And even though weirdly sometimes the cut really gets out of fashion, and that's the moment where I sort of put it in my storage, but it'll probably come back in 5 or 10 years time. So yes, we like clothes, but then I really think Fantastic Man also likes people. I think that's for me still the main basis for the magazine. I think, one of my favorite stories in this issue is the story of the man in seat 61, which is this website. Do you know the website? It's this man from Britain who has a website about train travel, train travel everywhere. And it's incredibly detailed. I actually used it last week because I went from Amsterdam to Milan, and you type that in And it comes with all the different possibilities of getting from Amsterdam to Milan in 17 hours or 13 hours or 12 hours, and tells you exactly where you can get a sandwich, on which train there is hot coffee, or whether there is an actual restaurant, or which transfer is too short. And it's a beautiful story that it's also always very important to us to find these people that are just fascinating and have nothing to do with fashion.
Absolutely. I think that also brings the magic of the magazine. So, was there any kind of particularly issue that you love it and you keep it as, I was telling you before the interview that the Tom Ford one was my very first Fantastic Man. So, I'll always remember that one and the David Beckham one, which is the one I was working with you guys in Amsterdam. Is there a special one or you're someone who always likes to look at the future?
No, there are issues that I love. I mean, I love the one with Helmut Lang on the
Oh,
cover. I thought that
yes.
was great. But then I also love the one with Brian Ferry on the cover, just because when I was when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, actually my first album that I ever bought was Let's Stick Together from Brian Ferry. And Brian Ferry was my hero as a child. So to have him on the cover was incredible. There's an amazing cover of Jonathan Anderson that we did for issue number 21, I think. It's also very dear to me. So there are a lot of issues. It's easier to think about the past than about the future, obviously, because how are we gonna top this doorstopper of an issue? I don't know yet, but we're slowly starting to think about that.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I wonder if there are any highlights of this issue. Of course, we're talking about the 10 covers, so there's plenty of profiles to read. But I wonder if there's anything else. I mean, did you decide to look back at the history, some of your contributors, some like a best of type of thing?
Well, we tried not to make it too nostalgic, this issue, because
Mm,
that would have been quite easy to do. But I think, in a way, the only really nostalgic story inside this issue is the fact that Rupert Everett makes a
mm,
return in the issue. But we did make a little supplement, which is 20 dream covers, and it sort of looks at all the covers we didn't have in the past. Because we only chose one very often, and there was often another story or another image of the same cover story that we thought could also have been a very nice cover. So through this booklet, that's a supplement, we're also telling the history of the 20 years a little bit, because we're looking back at, Tom Brown in the first issue, or Luca Guadagnino, or Shane Oliver. So it's a little bit of a retelling of our history.
Oh, that's perfect. A collector's thing for sure. What about the readers? Do you feel have they changed comparing 2005 and 2025? Perhaps I wonder if you got like a younger readership or do you feel you kept quite constant in a way?
I feel like we've stayed quite constant, but I'm happy to discover that young people read the magazine. I mean, it'd be scary if the same readers that we had 20 years ago are still the readers, meaning they're all 20 years older. I mean, that would be, a lot of them, I'm 20 years older, you're 20 years older,
Yes.
everybody's 20 years older, but I'm really pleased with the sort of people that contact us, because they want to intern for us, or they want to do something for us, or they want to write for us. And that sort of like encourages me that there is a constant stream of new readers.
You have to celebrate because I tell you something, Hat. Everyone that I mention, I worked at Fantastic Man. I was interning there for 6 months. Everybody is impressed. So there's a cool aura to the brand. And it's remarkable that you kept it like this for 20 years in a way.
Well, yeah, that is nice to know. But why that is probably more difficult for me to say than for you to say. I don't know. You have a specific perspective on working with us because you did it for 6 months, but then sort of like there's a before and after for you. Whereas there is a before for me, but no after yet. So I sort of like I bounce that question back to you. What is it?
Honestly, I think it's the consistency. As I discussed, every issue is a delight. The attention to detail when it comes to clothing and stories, like you said, the guy about the train. And I just want to ask you something else, Hat. Of course, the focus here is Fantastic Man, but I do have to mention that But is back. I mean, it's been back now for a few issues. I think it's also doing very well. How do you feel about that one?
Hmm. Yeah, no, we're very pleased with the return of of Butt because we put it to sleep for about 10 years, I think. And then 2, 3 years ago, we brought it back. And it's great. And, the reason to do that was also because there is a younger generation who is interested in the magazine. And we found some very good people to work with who make the magazine for us and with us. One thing we didn't want to do is for Job and me to again be the editors of Butt, because we thought it has to have a younger generation steering it. So that's why the people that we're working with are just very good and bring a new perspective on things and bring names and bring subjects to the magazine that I am very interested in to read as well, but I could never find myself.
And with Button, of course, but more with Fantastic Man, you see amazing, all the top brands basically are advertising with you. What's your relationship with the brand? So clearly there's a level of trust in there because, we talk here on the Stack, the world have changed for many magazines. They have less advertising now. There's challenges, but at least from a reader, I don't see that with Fantastic Man.
No, I think there is trust. I mean, maybe part of the trust is the fact that we already do it for 20 years. So, and indeed, I think we are quite consistent, even though we, like to surprise ourselves and like to surprise the people around us sometimes. I think ultimately we're consistent. So I do think brands trust that. I think we've also always been very clear that we do want to be independent from even the people that we work with. And so we're always also quite open about that there are limits to what we can do in commercial partnerships. And, selling our soul isn't really what we're looking at. So I think that we have clear boundaries what we do, and I think that's sort of respected.
Now, a fashion question, because I do like to follow your style. I love your orange trousers. Can you tell me where they're from?
Yeah, they're Prada. They're the Linea Rossa from Prada.
They're beautiful.
And I wore them. I've had them for a while, actually. And it was difficult pulling them off, in sort of like, when do I wear them? And they're very thin. Even on a summer day, they're quite cold. I hadn't worn them this winter, and I pulled them out last week to big success, I must say. And it just makes you realize that it's nice to wear a sort of statement piece sometimes.
I love a statement piece. And I saw again, you're wearing like a New Balance with Stone Island, I think, trousers as well. Was that you posted?
Yeah, the shoes were Stone. Actually, yeah, the shoes were Stone Island.
Okay.
The sort of Stone Island New Balance combination. It just happened to be with Stone Island trousers.
Did you change the way you dressed compared to 20 years ago? Let's say, did you change much the way you dress, or not really?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, a little bit. I mean, sometimes you find an old picture of yourself and you wear, and I remember a picture of wearing jeans with a suit blazer. I mean, that's sort of my worst nightmare at the moment, unless I guess you do it well. I mean, that's with everything, it's ugly until you do it well, and then it's beautiful. But I think I've sort of settled on a certain personal style quite a while ago. And weirdly, as much as I see with the Prada trousers, for instance, that the statement piece gets a lot of attention, I also love good basics. I mean, a good gray marl sweater is kind of the holy grail of clothing for me.
Thank you very much, Hat, and congratulations once again. Their new issue is out now. To get a copy, go to fantasticman.com or to the best newsstands in the world. And now to another magazine I absolutely adore. I've been buying the film title Empire since I was young in Brazil. They have this unique place in the market where they can feature a big blockbuster on the cover, but also have an in-depth article inside about the latest indie. The new June issue is an absolute delight, celebrating 50 years of Jaws, the ultimate summer blockbuster. A pleasure to welcome to our studio the editor of Empire, Nick de Semlyen.
It started with an email, or maybe even a written letter. It was back in 2002. I did work experience, and I was there for a couple of weeks. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, as I was leaving, I went up to the reviews editor at the time, a guy called Alan Morrison, who I owe my career to pretty much, and said, is there anything I can review? Like, I'll review anything. And as it happened, someone had dropped out of reviewing a film called The Wash. I don't recommend it. It's about Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre running a car wash. And I said, I'll review that. So
how many stars?
I actually gave it 3. I think it's less than 3. I haven't revisited it, but I was so excited to be doing it that I probably gave it a bit of, I was in too good a mood. But yeah, and then I did a couple of years of freelancing and then got a job as sub-editor and kind of, worked my way up. And yeah, it's surreal.
That's amazing. Well, and talking about Empire, as I said, I've been a big fan. But the world of film magazines have changed a lot. I mean, even here in the UK, we had the closure of Total Film. But what I see, Nick, a lot of niche film titles, which are great. We've covered that here on the stack. But I think the position of Empire on the newsstand is quite a special one. I mean, you guys are almost the only ones there. No, I'm not talking about film magazines in general, but I mean the ones that you can talk about Jaws, you can talk about Avengers, you can talk about the latest Oscar winner.
Yeah, there's a really great freedom to it that, I mean, in terms of the cover, you can't just put anything on the cover. You have to, be quite strategic and generally go with the bigger movies. And I think maybe people might look at just the covers and make an assumption. But yeah, we're really proud that we're able to cover all kinds of films. So in the latest issue, we have, a big thing on the new Star Wars show. But we also have 6 pages on The Ballad of Wallace Island, which is this small new British film from Tim Key, which we saw and loved and we wanted to champion. So hopefully that's in every issue, that sense of the big blockbusters, but then also the small independent films and curiosities. And then with everything, we try and have a sense of humour generally. Not everything, maybe not Schindler's List, but we try and bring a kind of certain Empire humour, which I really love and has been there since the birth of the magazine, and we try and keep that intact.
And the June issue for me is fantastic. I think it's one of my favorite covers, I would say, celebrating 50 years of Jaws. And I mean, I like that because, although, of course, the latest blockbuster is cool, but I think this one, it's nostalgic, but it's a very powerful cover, I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, the both covers, the newsstand cover and the subscribers cover, which I love, are both done by the same artist, Paul Shipper, who is fantastic, and he does a lot of stuff with us. We set him loose on Jaws, and he came up with amazing stuff. Yeah, it's a chance to be really creative, and in a way, when you're not being given the assets by the studio, it's quite scary because you're creating something out of nothing, but at the same time, it gives you a sense of freedom. And our creative director, Chris Lupton, is brilliant as well at kind of envisioning these really impactful covers. So yeah, hopefully it does well. But we do like every now and again looking backwards and celebrating something that we love. Last year we did a Star Wars prequels issue, which was actually pretty much our biggest issue of the year. It took us by surprise because it felt a bit risky to me almost putting that together because the prequels are very divisive. Not everyone is a fan of The Phantom Menace, but people really connected to it and loved it. And it sold like record numbers online, which kind of was a really nice kind of affirmation. So yeah, Jaws, everyone loves Jaws, and somehow it's 50. We wanted to do something different as well, because obviously it's been written about lots. We've done extensive interviews with Steven Spielberg over the years. We even shot him with the big shark at Universal Studios a few years ago. So this time we wanted to do something different. And so we're kind of looking at it through a modern prism. And we got lots of actors, directors, all kinds of people who are working in Hollywood now to talk about how it's kind of inspired them and to give their particular insight. So everyone from Simon Pegg talking about Roy Scheider's performance as the leading man, to Greg Nicotero from The Walking Dead about the great shock moment with the severed head. It's not severed. I always think it's severed. It's not severed. And Lee Winnell, the director of Wolfman and The Invisible Man, talking about how Jaws has inspired his films. So hopefully lots of insights and lots of entertaining kind of things in there.
And Empire is still very much respected by the industry. I mean, you guys have access to any director you want, let's be honest. You go to the sets of films, you usually have this before any other magazines, right? So after 36 years, I think Empire is still very much standing, right?
It's really nice. I mean, we do have those relationships with filmmakers that are really special and lets you do really kind of interesting and exciting things. So, for instance, we're doing something this year called The Path to Pandora. In every single issue up to Christmas, we're going to have a world exclusive story about Avatar 3, Avatar Fire and Ash. And we approached James Cameron with that plan and said, we've never done this before. Are you up for it? And lo and behold, he was up for it, and it's been amazing so far. We have this plan all the way up to the end of the year, kind of getting more and more ambitious as it goes, and we have interviews and exclusive art on Avatar. So Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it's not like we can get anyone. It's not quite like that. It might look like that, but it's still, it might, yeah, well, we try and make it look effortless, but it's not. There's a lot of negotiation. Not everyone is available. So you never quite know who's going to say yes and who's going to say no. There is that element. I think that makes it exciting because when you get a yes from someone that you never dreamt would say yes, it's incredible. It's an incredible feeling. So it's not like we can just call a number and any director will get involved. But I think a lot of it is bringing an idea to them that will excite them and is something they haven't done before.
Who actually reads Empire? Because I know you have some special subscriptions where you're almost part of a kind of a club in a way, right? So I wonder, tell us a bit, perhaps the difference between the subscriber and the people that will buy on the newsstand, depending on the cover, for example.
So the newsstand is really geared towards, the newsstand cover certainly is geared towards people who might just be browsing. They may or may not have read Empire before. They may or may not be diehard film fans, but hopefully we'll hook them in with something. So we put a lot of time into our covers and the design and the cover lines. Whereas the subscription, our subscribers are, we're assuming they know Empire, they know the brand, they've kind of maybe grown up with us, they're big film fans. And so that lets us do something different. So the subscriber covers don't have any words on them at all generally, and they're just the image. And that lets us create something really special, I think. And that's a real money can't buy thing, because unless you're a subscriber, you can't get that art. So yeah, I think that's a big perk. But we also have Empire VIP Club, which is like a premium thing that we do where we put on screenings and they get to come along, ask Jeff Goldblum a question or see, a big new film weeks before it opens, be the first to see it. So that's for our most hardcore, dedicated people. And those are always really fun to put together.
And I'm just browsing here the new issue. I have to say, one of my favorite parts of the magazine is the ranking, because it feels quite nerdy at times. It's very specific, but beautiful. You did Gene Hackman here, but I think it's so nice. I like the kind of the regulars, the ranking, the crossword. I think those parts really matter in a magazine, in my opinion.
The ranking, yeah, Chris Hewitt does the home entertainment section and edits it and has come up with many of these ideas. The ranking is always really fun to be involved in.
Controversial at times, maybe.
Controversial, very controversial. We did one on the films of 1985 recently, and the Arnie film Commando came in at number 2. And even we were like, this can't be right. Like, there has to be a recount. But they're always really fun to do, and they get quite rowdy. And then Chris has to cut them down. But yeah, it's about coming up with new ideas, for franchises that haven't been done before. And Empire's been going on so long. They're coming up with, something that hasn't been done that really has longevity. We used to do something called Movie Mastermind, where we would quiz a director on their own film or an actor on their own films. That was really fun, but eventually it ran for like however many years, and we decided to retire it. There's a new one in the current magazine called Special Thanks To, and if you stay right to the end of the credits, I don't know if you've ever done this, right to the end of a film's credit in the cinema, you see a little thanks to, and then you get a list of names. And so this is talking to the directors of those films and saying, why are you thanking this person? And you get some really interesting, weird stories that you wouldn't hear otherwise.
Do you know a pet hate I have? When you're watching a film on a streaming, let's say Amazon Prime or whatever, they move to the next film, without asking you. That's terrible.
Annoys me too. I hate it.
And even, I know you could stop it, but when you think about stopping, there's no time for that.
I know. Or they speed them up, yeah. But when they just immediately say, you got 5 seconds, and then go to another thing, that's a pet peeve of mine as well.
Looking ahead, of course, the June issue is wonderful. I think everybody should buy 50 Years of Jaws. Are you excited for the film offers this year? When you're thinking perhaps about the upcoming covers for Empire magazine, is it a good year, do you think?
Yeah, I think every year has got stuff that comes out of nowhere and surprises you. You just never know. That's the magic of doing this job, I think, is that you literally never know. Even if the trailer for something looks terrible, you go and see the film and it might really surprise you in a positive way. Or something might seem like an absolute slam dunk and you go and see it and it breaks your heart because it's your favorite director with your favorite actors and you're like, this can't go wrong. And that happens. So you just never know when lightning is going to strike and you're going to fall in love with something. So that's the great feeling about sitting down. And so what we do is really just delve into the stories behind everything. And, we have a saying like every day is Christmas Eve. And so that's our kind of philosophy, that we hope for the best with everything. And often we're disappointed, but sometimes you go and you have a new favorite movie. And so yeah, there's stuff coming out. The new Jurassic film I'm interested in.
We're both fans.
Yeah,
I'm very excited.
We were talking beforehand. But, have they run out of ideas, or is Gareth Edwards going to bring a load of new energy to it? And it's going to be fantastic. I'm excited to see Scarlett Johansson fighting dinosaurs. There's something primal about that, even though you've seen a bunch of them already. They're bringing back Tron, which is interesting, because I think the last Tron was a bit of a mess, but I think it's a really interesting world to play in, and I'm really excited for Avatar. But then beyond that, you've got Christopher Nolan doing The Odyssey, you've got Avengers Doomsday, which is going to be the biggest movie of all time, you've got a new Spielberg film where he's coming back to UFOs and aliens. So there's so much to kind of be excited about. So there always is.
How international is your audience? Because I was telling Nick, honestly, when I was a kid in Brazil, for me, to buy Empire was a big thing. And when I go to the US, Empire is in the newsstand. I think, and although you are, of course, a British magazine, I have a feeling you have quite an international audience.
I think it definitely travels. We hear from people from all over the world, and I'm like, how did Empire end up there? How did it get there?
Somehow it did.
Somehow it made its way. And I think now having these digital magazine, the Readly, Apple News has opened everything up in a massive way that it's suddenly a lot more accessible. But we also get people subscribing from America or from Europe, even Australia. We did have an Australian edition. Sadly, it stopped a few years ago. But yeah, it does make its way around. Hopefully, I'm sure there are some football jokes that Chris Hewitt makes that don't travel as well outside of Britain, but hopefully it's accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Nick. And the June issue of Empire is out now. For more, go to empireonline.com. And finally on the show, and I gotta thank my colleague Monocle's Laura Kramer for this, Ben Lan. He's the CEO and co-founder of Colossal Biosciences, a Dallas-based biotech and genetic engineering startup working to bring back extinct species. Following the recent debut of the dire wolf, the first of its kind in over 10,000 years, Lan spoke to Monocle about the role of synthetic biology in conservation and the importance of slow journalism for science.
It's been a crazy week, right? We've had a lot, people really excited about it. People want the only thing that's been a little frustrating is I feel like the women and men scientists that have done something that no one's ever done, a lot of that got looked over because people wanted to have a philosophical debate on the classification of species. But no, it's been overall, it's been overwhelmingly positive. It's been insanely exciting. And, hopefully we're charting new ways that these technologies, in addition to current conservation methods, could be used for conservation. Colossal's talked a long time about the mammoth, the thylacine, and the dodo, which all those projects are on track, but now starting to show some of these animals come to life and some of these technologies help conservation, like our Red Wolf program. It is pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember you were telling me that you had a few species that were going to come out before all the other ones you just mentioned, and I can't believe direwolf is among them for the first one. It's so exciting. Monocle, we really love media. We support print media. What does that mean to you to be on the cover of Time for this?
Well, personally, as a kid, my grandfather, who's no longer with me, unfortunately, I don't know if you remember, but back in the 80s and the 90s, you could have little Photoshop. It wasn't Photoshop, but you could put your kid on the cover of Time or whatnot. Well, in my grandfather, my poppy's office at his job that he worked all of his life, his career, he had a photo of me and a photo of him together on the cover. It was a mock photo, right? It's one of those things you buy at a fair or you buy at a mall, right? One of those middle stands in the mall in the 80s and 90s, and had a mock photo of us on Time. And so it's kind of, for me personally, I just don't know, and this is respecting all media out there. I know there's a lot of great media out there, but Time is truly timeless. And, to have a picture of, Remus on the cover of Time and also alluding to the importance of these technologies for conservation, I don't know if there's anything that can really top that. For me, it's great. And one of the things that was really wonderful was that, Time Magazine, Rolling Stone, and The New Yorker, we didn't go out super wide with this to begin. And obviously that changed very quickly. But, they spent a lot of time with us. They saw the wolves. They spent time with our team. They probably spent I don't know how, I don't want to speculate for them, but it feels like on our side, we spent 100 hours with them. And so I feel like they really understood the importance of the work, the scientific achievement, which is like the equivalent of the moon landing for genetics. And I feel like they really understood what it meant for conservation. And then, obviously when the story broke, it went in 9,000 different directions, right? You had the poor little red wolves didn't even get mentioned. Everyone was like Game of Thrones or this or that or this. And so I will say it was a pretty surreal moment. I'm very appreciative of the amount of time that Time Magazine and some of the other outlets took into really understanding the work, right? And so we had no idea it was going to be a cover. I think it's truly remarkable, not just for Colossal, but for science, right? It's like we see a lot of cover stories right now, and we get sold a lot of, and I'm not just saying just with Time, but a lot of, we've got tariff wars, we've got chip wars, we've got AI wars, we've got all this like negative hope. And so for like a kid or a parent to like look at a trusted magazine like Time and see the potential of synthetic biology made real. I don't know. For me, it was a really moving experience.
Oh yeah, and a full circle moment for you. And I love what you're saying there is essentially we're constantly bombarded with negative covers, and this is actually a positive story, like you said, that's hopeful about what's possible in science.
Yeah, I think and I think that not everyone took it in that direction because we live in a very polarizing world. But one of the things that I'm really big on personal freedoms, right? And so some people, this new technologies are scary, right? And new technologies are inspiring and they're interesting, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue them. And for me, this was a moment from a reflection perspective where I think it scared some people. I think it got people really excited. We've had a flood of teachers and kids and fans of Game of Thrones, fantasy. People didn't know that we needed to spend time on wolf conservation. So, I mean, I think there's been so much noise, but so much good has come out of it, which has been awesome, right? Because I do think that we need science more now than ever. And if we can do things that like direwolves and woolly mice that inspire the next generation, that those are the people that, are going to inherit our mistakes. And I think technology is one of the main things. Technology and education are going to be the two things that probably really save them.
Thank you, Ben Lan. I needed the direwolf man on the show. You can hear more from him on Friday, the 18th of April edition of our news show, The Globalist. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks as ever to our editor, Gert Jonkers. Any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, you can subscribe to The Stack on monocle.com, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.